Welcome to the Galen Trombley Show. You can find me on Facebook at Galen Trombley, on Instagram at Galen Trombley, and on YouTube at Galen Trombley. Spelling GaelanTrombley. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Galen Trombley Show. Welcome to episode 118 of the Galen Trombley Show. And it's been actually a while. We did not get canceled. Nobody can cancel us. It's actually just my own show. I just didn't have... I've been away for a few weeks, so this is... we're back, and I'm very excited about my guest today, Sue Matton. She is... I'll get the correct title here. The Vice President of Economic Development at the North Country Chamber of Commerce.
Correct.
Beautiful. I want to make sure that didn't change. I probably should have asked you before. And... If it sounds weird, I have new headsets on. I know you can't see this, but that's fine. I'm just letting you know in case I act weird or there's dead space. I'm fidgeting with the new gear, and I have a new arm that I'm trying to work in to see because mine was starting to fall apart. So I'm going heavier duty. Again, you cannot see this, which is I don't care. I'm just letting you know if you hear like a clang or something, it means it's fallen down, and I'm trying to scramble to pick it up, which might be when I pass everything to Sue and just let her tell you a long story about the days of coffee and everything we just discussed.
Okay.
So Sue, for people that do not know you, thank you so much for coming on, but give them just kind of a background as to how you got to 2021, Sue Matton.
Okay. So I've been in economic development since 1995. That's when I came to the Chamber of Commerce. There really was no function for economic development at that time. Gary Douglas, who is the president of the organization, said, "Hey, we really don't have any business services. We've been mostly, he'd not been there very long. And he said, well, mostly we did tourism and some stuff like that and some festivals and Oktoberfest thing. And, so we'd like to start having some business services. And so he actually asked me, this was actually earlier than that. I was a volunteer before I was on the staff. And he said, so could you serve on the Small Business Committee, because I was a business owner at the time. And I said, oh, sure, I can do that. So we had this little committee that we were on. And pretty soon he said, well, I'd like you to serve on the board. It's very hard to get small business people to serve on the board. Mm-hmm. It's a big time commitment, right? I thought, okay, I'll do that. And then he said, well, could you serve on the executive board? Okay, I can serve on the executive board. And then he asked me to be on the actual staff because I was transitioning from owning the restaurant and going to do something else.
So how did so Gary came on
1993, I think.
Yes, but Gary came on the podcast December, maybe, something like that. And so Gary's one of those guys that I'm just very fascinated by, and I was excited when he came on. And he's just the guy that, for all the years growing up, he was always in the paper. So you see this little I gotta call him a godfather. Just you see him in all these photos, and he just looks. He's very well dressed, and you never really you hear him talk, but he's not a lot. And he was always very it seemed like there was an aura around him that he was just this. And him obviously much better than I do. But so when he came on, I was super excited to have him come on. Mm-hmm. But transitioning, I know, like I said, how is it? How does Gary get your name to get on that? Because you guys came around the same time, really, right?
I was there. I was 95, and so I had been doing it as a volunteer. Actually, the way I got involved as a volunteer was I'd been in the business for a long, long time, and I thought it's time for me to give back. And the person who was the executive director before Gary came on as president sent around a little card. A little postcard. It said, would you volunteer for a committee? We're thinking of having one. so I volunteered, right?
It's a very passive-aggressive way of asking, right?
Right, And so I said, well, I really should start to get involved. I've been a member for a long time. I said, I really should start to get involved and give back because I now have the time because I've been in the business for 17 years. And so I now have the time to do that. And I know that it's important for small business voices to be heard. I said, okay, I'll volunteer. And so then as I was on the committee and he came on board, while I was a volunteer. And so he kind of knew me from that. And I guess he recognized that I was somebody who was willing to work hard. And so he said it okay.
So it's just kind of a chancing. I mean, say chance encounter. You set yourself up for the opportunity, but it was, kind of. So did you ever have any plans to go from? Because I mean, economic development obviously is building up the economy and building up businesses and a lot of other stuff that I'll let you talk about because you know way more about it than I do. But going from a small business into that, I mean, was that a perfect, intro for you, background?
So that was right about the time that the base was closing. Mm-hmm. And so what he asked me to do was to set up a program to help the small businesses that were affected by the base closure. So I was a small business, and I was affected by the base closure. So, it was really opportune for me, but it was also something that I could really relate to the people who were having issues. And there were certain industries that were affected more than others. Car dealerships were affected, restaurants, the hospitality industry.
So when you get the nod to go into something like that, is that intimidating at the time? Or did you think that this is something like, no, I can do it? Or do you think, has it just evolved quite a bit from those early days?
It absolutely evolved because I made my own job, right? I mean, there was no job. There was nothing. But people used to say to me at that time, it must be so depressing to be in economic development in times like this. I know it's exciting. We now have an opportunity to do things that we would never have had the opportunity to do before.
So... And I think that's one of when I was talking to Gary, and I've talked to other people, at the chamber, but Gary, again, with you guys both being, seasoned, we'll call you seasoned vets.
Thank you.
Seasoned vets.
Better than old.
Experienced. Yeah, not old, but experienced. That, I think that you guys have seen, it's kind of like that underdog mentality, but I think, do you think you thrive off that, kind of being like, kind of the underdog, but seeing the growth that has happened over the last 25 years?
I think I thrive when it is something that is challenging. Mm-hmm. So to do the same thing over and over again would not be interesting to me. So to be able to have a challenge, let's make this thing happen. That's exciting to me.
So when you get in when you say a challenge, like what's it? I was going to go in this later, but I think it's a segue. Like, what's a normal day for you? And when I say normal, I use that very lightly because I think you're kind of like when someone asks, what's a normal day of a realtor? Like, I did a podcast today. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just a bunch of random stuff we do. But, what's a normal day for you back then? And then how has it transitioned to now?
Oh, well, we were at the time when I started, I was really dealing mostly with really small businesses. So a business that sold typewriters or a wine store, and a lot of them down by where the base was, so that plaza down in the south end and those kind of things. Now I mostly deal with. We still have services absolutely for small businesses. They're the backbone of our organization, but the work that I do now often involves much larger projects, bringing in a really large company that is going to also have all sorts of other needs, and that's really challenging. So
back then, you're probably meeting with a lot of, just like you said, smaller companies on like one-off meetings here and there. And what was the process like? So the base closes, obviously not the high point, I guess, economically, but you said it showed opportunity. It showed different ways that you guys could now pivot and kind of grow or capitalize on probably not the best card deck or hand dealt, but you guys made the best of it. So, what was the focus at right after the base closed?
So what we saw as an opportunity was the Canadian market and attracting businesses to our area from Canada. It seemed like the natural market for us. So you need to have something new, right? And we had always had Canadian travelers. They came down, they ate in our restaurants, they stayed in their hotels, they shopped in their stores. But to get those companies, there was a start of a very small movement to have warehouses and things here, because it was so much less expensive. So we'll capitalize on that. Let's take that to the next level, and start to try and get other businesses to come here and manufacturing to come here because those jobs pay better, and start to make a whole new economy because that economy of the base was gone.
I don't think I asked Gary this, but did the Canadian dollar affect the exchange rate back then?
Yeah, we're sitting at 62 cents.
That's what I thought. So them coming down, was that challenging to get over that hump?
Yeah. So you had a reduction in the amount of Canadian traffic coming down for tourism, and then for us, shopping has always been a big part of that tourism. And then you had the base leaving, and then so there's all of these, there's a perfect storm of things happening.
So, what was the big sell to the Canadians at the time? Like to get over that hump.
Sure. So the thing that we have always had going for us, and that you cannot buy, is geography. Mm-hmm. We are 60 miles from Montreal. We are 17 miles from the Canadian border, and so we marketed ourselves as a gateway to the U.S. There are 320 or 30 million people in the United States, and there are 32 million in Canada. So you saturate the Canadian market a lot faster than you can saturate the U.S. market. So we offered them proximity. You can have your operation here, but you don't have to move everything here, all of the functions. You don't have to duplicate those, because you can have your HR person or your engineer or your whatever you need that is a specialized position for a while. As you grow, you can still have that person in Montreal, and they travel down every day. If you put your operation in North Carolina or Florida or Texas, then you have to duplicate those functions, because you can't just have somebody go there for a day.
And that was the big selling point?
Well, yeah, and we still use that.
And and I was going to say, I've heard that before when, Gary had mentioned, trying to, and I think Joel did too, when I was talking to Joel about Namstrand, like they were talking about, you don't need everybody here,
right? Technically.
He goes, especially the way how digital everything is. So when did you start seeing like the first trend or first traction of getting companies down here? What year roughly?
It was already starting a little bit in the 90s, and those operations were mostly warehouses, and they were mostly we're shipping some stuff down and we're going to distribute it out of the United States. And the reason that they did that was because now you have it on the U.S. side of the border. No matter how good you are, if you have a border in between with the uncertainties of, is it going to be able to clear, are your goods going to be able to clear, are you going to be able to are you going to have a hold up because customs decides they want to look at something for 3 days or 4 days or a week, you have uncertainty. You put it on the U.S. side of the border, and you've eliminated one degree of uncertainty. Now, if you need to ship it, and it needs to be there in 2 days, you can say, "Oh, I can do 2-day delivery."
And that was part of the expansion of the border up in Champlain. And it started like opening up.
Oh, well, that happened later.
Okay, so this was even prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
And what year was that roughly?
I'm trying to think now. That was, it was probably 2002, 2003. It was after 9/11.
Okay. Was 9/11 affect a lot of it? Travel? Or do you not see it?
9/11 did affect the border, and it we had been saying for years and years, you need to improve this border. Mm-hmm. We can't have trucks sitting in lines that are a mile long or 2 miles long waiting to get through. It's impeding commerce, right? But nobody seemed to really, do anything about it. But then after 9/11 happened, they were very concerned. The U.S. government was very concerned about security. And so they wanted to have more functions there for security. And that was, it was then fortuitous that also helped us to increase the capacity so that trade could move more freely.
And I mean, now, what's the number again of Canadian companies down here?
Somewhere around 200. It's hard to tell sometimes because they may be owned by a company who's owned by a company.
So do you guys, like at the chamber, do you guys have like a master like map of all the businesses out there?
No,
I always
we
wondered, like I was
don't.
thinking, you know those maps that you have, like people when they travel, they put like a pin on like where they traveled, and then I've seen, I saw that, well actually, it was, Mike Cashman the other day posted a photo of someone had given him, and I have two of them hanging up when you first walk in. If you want to look, I think they were through the Chamber or maybe Strictly Business back in the day, but they were kind of like cartoon images.
Oh yeah. Well, we didn't do those, but they're cool. Yeah.
But I was thinking, yeah, like looking at that, is there like this like database where you can just like zoom in and you guys have like everything like laid out of like these are all the companies that are the spaces. I mean, someone obviously knows about them. I just didn't know if there was this master like draft copy that you can just like, oh, they moved here and they moved here, and you're kind of like just
Google does that.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say this is simple.
I don't need to do that. Google does that.
See, this is the thing. I think people think I'm like way smarter technology wise, and I'm not. I'm just like, I think that, like I was watching my kid the other day on his like iPad thing doing this construction thing, and he's like, do this, do, and I'm like,
how old is he?
He's 3.
Yeah. It's like,
I'm like, dude, I'm fairly good. Like everybody's like, oh, you do all this technology. I'm like, okay, Google and YouTube do a lot of work where I just like how to do this, and I make it look like I know what I'm doing, but. Then when I get into the nuts and bolts, I'm like, I got to like look up this thing. I got to read a bunch of manuals. And so that's, like I said, probably the easy answer. Google always has the answer.
Google does it, right?
So what's your days like now? So you transition, like, do you find that your job, how much has your job changed since when you started?
Oh, in some ways it's changed a lot, but in some ways it hasn't really changed at all. I mean, we still have a member, contacts us and they have a question. What do I do about this? I've got there's a situation with an employee, or I've got a regulatory issue, or I have a question about what I should do about this particular thing, or I need to find somebody that could sell me this thing, that I need, or you never know. That's what makes it interesting, right?
Do you handle most of those, or is that...
Well, everybody does. Everybody does.
Okay, so I mean, is there calls that come into the chamber and then just direct us to?
They try and get them to the person who might give them the answer.
It's like the old directory when you pull out the phone and make the call lines and stuff. So,
yeah.
Okay, so the funny thing was, I want to kind of go back a little bit, because you said, my first questions were, how did you get your start? How did you get to the chamber? And how'd you get into economic development, which you told me that it basically just all circled around owning a business. So I was not aware of what you owned before, but tell people what you owned prior to the current gig.
I owned the International House of Pancakes in the early 90s.
And the reason I smile is because it's IHOP, but like, was that, have you ever called it IHOP? Or
yeah.
Okay, you always say like the full term, and I'm like, I don't know if people realize what it actually stands for, because it's just like IHOP, but the same building, it was the same A-frame, right?
Yeah.
Was that built for IHOP, or was that?
Yeah.
Is that like?
And I wasn't the first owner of it. Yeah.
But wasn't that the way the IHOPs looked back then?
Long time ago. Yeah, that was kind of it was the design, I think, to look like a Tyrolean building.
Yeah. Well, now it looks like was it a chalet, like a Swiss ski chalet. Like it looks like it should be dropped in Wilmington. Yeah. But it's Michigan's Plus now. But I just remember that as a kid, and like even the other day, the Lums came up.
Oh, yeah.
Like where Lums used to be. And I was like...
I used to love to go there.
Yeah, I remember going as a kid. I mean, I was young at the time when I think it probably closed down probably... I don't know, I was in maybe high school or something. Mm-hmm. So, but we start hearing these old businesses that were there and how much things have evolved over time. Yeah. It's just like, oh my God, I do remember that place. And like, what was the restaurant scene back then? You had IHOP. You had obviously like, not as many chains as you see now, but...
There were different chains, and that's the thing that happens is in the economy, things evolve. And so although the businesses that are here now and the manufacturing operations that are here now are different than they might have been 15, 20 years ago, one comes in, one goes out, and as the economy changes, as taste changes, as needs change, then you need to adapt. And I think the thing that we as a community have done well is we've adapted. So we've remained strong. When you look at other communities and where they are now and where they were 20 years ago, it's a really good success story.
I would attribute like the North Country. It's like, again, kind of like the stock market. when it goes up and down, up and down. Like you're always gonna have the ups and the downs, but it's always climbing. Like you know what I mean? Like over time, it's like continued to go up and up. And I think there's been a big resurgence over. And now I always wonder: is this just because I'm now a little bit more aware of stuff as I've gotten older, and a little more like have a career and have a family, and I think I pay attention to things more now than I did when I was a kid. But it just seems like a lot of things have popped up recently, and it seems like there's a lot of development recently. Now, when a lot of those companies come in, what's your role, I guess, when a company comes in, or what's your role as an economic, the vice president of economic development, like in regards to these companies coming to North Country?
Well, you never know how they're going to come in. They hear of us somehow, and we put tools out there that we hope draws them to us. So we just started a new website. We just launched it yesterday. It's called NYMTL, and it's a foreign direct investment website. So it's in French, it's in English, so that the people from Canada and Quebec can be comfortable with it. It has all sorts of facts about our area and what we have for transportation.
What's the website again?
NYMTL.com.
New York, Montreal.
New York, Montreal.
.com.
Absolutely.
There you go. Perfect.
Because that's our main market, right? Now, do companies come from other places? Absolutely. They come from Australia. They come from New Zealand. They come from all over the place. They come from every place except for Antarctica. But
they just had a big glacier thing break off of that. You see that?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Well, they saw like the drone footage, and it was like this big, just long crack. And I'm like, that's not
that's
good.
good. But anyway, So we try to put information out there so that they find us, and they say, "Oh, that place might be interesting." So if a site selector is looking for a place to put the expansion of their business or new operation, or they're starting a new business, say a technology business or something, we want them to be able to find us. And hopefully then they contact us because our contact information is on there.
Do you, if a company comes here and again, I'm assuming when they call you, you're the one, heading kind of the initial plan or steps to get them here and the knowledge and information and setting up the meetings and.
Yeah, we need to work with all our partners. And the other great thing about our area is we work together very nicely. So, when you have something like this happening, you need a lot of different parties involved. You need the state of New York that may have incentives for the company. Companies would like that, they'd like to have some kinds of help to put their business where they're creating jobs. You need the people who are in the development, the real estate industry. You need people who are able to supply the things that the company needs. The company comes here and they need internet, and they need copy equipment, and they need racking, and they need all sorts of, you never know, it depends on what kind of business it is, but they need a lot of things. So we try to connect them to all of those resources. Oh, and you need to be able to incorporate your company, and it'd be good if you had an accountant so you could figure out what you owe in taxes, all those things.
I remember, and again, when Gary was talking about it, he was like, he goes, not to offend you because everybody's got real estate. Because he was saying to me at the start, and I said, well, that makes sense. You want to come in, like you said, the tax laws and what's the incentives and what's the things they aren't even aware of. Usually their first thought is real estate. And they're like, let's flip that around.
They say,
which makes sense.
I need a building. Well, you do, but you also need all these other things. So let's think about that.
So when you have somebody, I look at like my business as when someone comes to me and says, I want to buy or I want to sell. I was like taught early on, think of yourself, and again, it's different, but think of yourself as like a doctor. A doctor wouldn't just go in and say, well, here's medicine. Like, here's a house. Right. Like, you look at it like, well, what's your issue? What's your diagnosis? Let me diagnose the problem. And I try to look at the same way because everybody wants to buy and sell. And I'm like, buying and selling, you don't just wake up one day and say, I want to buy or sell something. Typically, it's over time or a life event. Marriage, death, divorce, kids out, downsizing or getting new, having babies. And so you look at all these things that I always start from like, what's the goal? And let's work our way back. And does it even make sense to buy or sell? And I've talked both people, buyers and sellers, that are doing exactly that because, and again, that's like counterproductive to what I should be doing. But at the end of the day, if it's not taking care of the person, I'm like, listen, you don't want to do this. You don't want to buy. You're going to move in 2 years. You plan on renting this thing or no? Okay, you can have no equity. Just rent and have almost no ties. You can pack up in a month and leave. Same thing with a seller. It's like, well, you don't have the cash or it doesn't really make much sense to move there versus, you know what I mean, if you're making a small jump or whatever. Yeah. So do you guys look at that when people come? Like, have you told people not to come down here?
What we do is we help them to look at it and see what is the best for them. So, most of the time people say, yep, I want a building. I want a building. I need a building, and I need, I think I need 2,000, 10,000, 40,000. I don't know. I need
20-foot ceilings.
Yeah, I don't know. But we try and get them then to take a little step back. And is it time? Is it time for you to actually buy that building or lease that building, or should you be working with a third-party logistics company for a little while? Mm-hmm. Maybe they could send out your goods, because if you come down and you get that building, now you also going to have employees, and now you got to figure out all the things about the taxes and the withholdings and the laws and all of those things. So maybe you take it a little bit slower and you do it this way, and then those companies are very thankful that they've not jumped into something that was not ready, they weren't ready for. And that's where we get most of our growth, is these little things that then become bigger things, that become bigger things and bigger things and bigger things.
Do you think that's because you laid a solid foundation at the start?
Plus we
or gain the trust and, took baby steps?
Yes, but I think also we don't just, let's sign the lease or sign the contract and then bye. Mm-hmm. What we want to do is we want to be the kind of community that is working with these companies for the life of their time here, so that we keep them here, hopefully for a longer period of time, that we help them to grow, that we help them through their issues so that they can remain strong and those jobs can remain in our community.
Do you find that companies are, and I know it's probably tough to answer because it's not, you haven't seen the full lifespan of these companies, but do you find they're staying around longer than they typically would in the past, with like extra effort, or with, like you said, a little bit more of a hands-on or long-term approach to things? Do you find that they're staying, like, not as much turnover as we might have seen in the past, or do you find that the companies that are coming in are really have made a good stay in the community and haven't come in? And
I think most of the companies like it here. There are things that happen sometimes that are not in the control of us or of them. They get sold. There's a merger or something. And the company then has duplicate assets. And so those kinds of things happen. But there have been, just recently, there have been instances where companies have decided, I'll add to my operation here. I could have put it in Arizona where I had something. I could have put it in California where I had something, but I like Plattsburgh, and so I'm going to grow it here instead.
There was one recently, right?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
That's the one I saw with the ribbon cutting. And
Yeah.
Do you have to go to a lot of those?
I
don't. You might have been in the photo, to be honest.
I was, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was the one holding the ribbon.
Everybody's got masks on.
Joel and I were holding the ribbons on either end.
Okay. That makes sense, because I thought I saw Joel. I'm like, I don't know if that's Joel, but it's like the angle they take it at. Like,
oh, yeah.
I recognize Gary and Mark and Mike. Those are the only ones.
Right, yeah. And that was interesting, because that was that kind of instance where the company has assets in Montreal. They wanted to have the same kind of operation in the U.S., and they had something in California, and they had something here, and they decided that they were going to put it here.
Over California.
Yeah.
So when you have companies that come here, have you noticed, is there areas in the country that are like your biggest rivals? And maybe you won't think of them as rivals, but like, have you heard people say, well, it's either here or there? And
oh, sure. Yeah. And usually those are the geographically close ones other than us, right? Mm-hmm. So they might be looking at Vermont. They might be looking at Pennsylvania. The nice thing for us is that for manufacturing, at least here in New York, the manufacturing income tax rate is 0. And the reason they made that decision was because there are so many jobs created with manufacturing, and they're good paying jobs, right?
And this is all of New York State?
That's New York State. And if you look at Pennsylvania, it's 9 something. You look at Vermont, it's 9.9. So I think that's right. It might have been reversed. But anyway, it's way more than 0, you know. And so automatically the company has an incentive that you don't even have to apply for. It doesn't run out. You just don't have to do that.
And again, with being pretty much a straight shot north or south to the cities, to two major cities, I think helps too.
It does, because if you want to get to Vermont, you've got to go on secondary roads.
Yeah, and I mean that could add 3, 4, 5 hours to your trip.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's no, like I said, I think.
Geography.
Yeah. Well, again, it's probably mentioned Gary a lot, but it was like the strategic part of it. Gary said he's very
Absolutely.
strategic, and are you same way?
Oh yeah.
I was going to say.
I don't really enjoy the things that are not strategic. I want to be, what is the next thing?
Let your brain to go and challenge.
Yeah,
Do you play board games?
I used to play a lot of board games, but
what board games do you play?
I used to love to play Risk.
That's the one I was saying. I'm like, you have to be like a war kind of game,
right?
Or like
you just take over the world.
But it's the funny. So
my brother and I would just.
I loved Risk. That was.
Yeah.
I haven't played it in years, but it was. There was another. It was another game. It was like a World War II or some kind of game, and I think the cavalry or whatever. It was.
Mm-hmm.
It was. I forgot what the name of that one was. It wasn't Risk. It was another one, but Risk was the main one I played, and I just loved it because you go to the countries and you And I was always, as a kid, history was always my favorite because of stories. So it's just like old stories, and I used to love like the American Revolution, and I used to like we didn't get it. We always seemed like we had to do the American Revolution like every other year, which I love, but it was like I knew it so well. And then like the Civil War, I was like, I'm a little fuzzy on that. But no, that's what I was wondering from a strategic standpoint. Like Risk is all about strategy.
Oh yeah, you have to figure out which country is it more important for me to do from a long term standpoint.
So this is actually kind of funny, and I don't know if this is a good omen, a bad omen. It's not a good omen, a bad omen, whatever. So in December of 2019, during like Christmas time, my brother-in-law is in epidemiology.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the study of disease or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So sickness, disease, whatever. So he ends up bringing to our house this game called Pandemic. So I've never heard of this game. I didn't really even know what a pandemic was until 2 days ago. Where epidemic is it's like a when the disease is kind of contained, like within a country or an area, and a pandemic is when it starts spreading to other countries.
Because it's pan.
That's what my wife said. She goes like Pan America. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
Again, you're talking to me. I know a lot about a few things, not a lot. So that was something I was like,
I took Latin. Hey, that's
there you go. I was like, I took 8 years of French. You can't speak French, so you can see how my I'm not Latin. No way. So, but we play this game called Pandemic. But think of like Risk mixed with medical diseases, and it was the only board game I've ever played where it gave me anxiety because you would flip over a card and all of a sudden it was like it like split more stuff on the board and like, okay, listen, we couldn't even tackle what we needed to tackle now, and that was the idea. It was like pandemic spread. So if you're ever looking for a strategic board game, I think you would crush it. I think you and Gary just playing one-on-one would have a ball. Maybe
would.
throw in Joel or someone else
right,
there.
You'd
probably throw in Christy because I think Christy would just smack
there you
talk.
go.
But,
Yeah, there we go.
but you guys would just. But I just think like
She'd be going, nope, I win.
yeah, she'd do glitter or something on the board, and next thing you know, she found the cure. So I think something like that. The strategic part of it, yeah. I don't know, the board game was a tangent, but the idea of like I figured you'd be good at those things. Were you good at it or just enjoyed it?
I was. Yeah.
I was gonna say you can brag.
When my brother and I would play, it was like, oh, I'm gonna win. No, I'm gonna win. It would get really intense.
I think board games, it's always the ones that could end up with like the families fighting. But I said like my kids are young. I can't wait till we play board games which is probably not good because my wife's super competitive. So way more than I am. I'm not verbally competitive. She will get into it. When it comes down to like the economic development aspect, what do you think is the hardest thing to navigate in your business?
What is the hardest thing to navigate? Well, I think the thing that is the most challenging is in economic development. There's never a beginning. There's never an end. Right? And if you're the kind of person who needs instant gratification, economic development is not for you. We just had a company come in. It was during the pandemic. We worked with them for 6 years, and we'd go to trade shows and we'd say, "So, how are you guys doing? You ready? I know you've pulled the back a little bit on your plans. How are you going? You think you might be ready pretty soon?" "Oh yeah, we think. Well, we need some more contracts." And they'd see them, 6 months later, or we'd send them an email. So you're constantly, you have all of these things in various stages, and so you need to keep track of where everybody is and what they're doing and what they might do. And
so how do you keep that organized?
So lots of spreadsheets.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the screen, or you guys like print the stuff off and just like?
Usually on the screen, we actually have an economic developer group. It's all the local economic developers from the counties in the North Country, and one of the people who's in the group said yesterday, I'd like to talk about CRM, customer relation management systems, and I said, I don't know, I've tried a lot of them, and it really gets down to, you just gotta have it there and remember that and put that, okay, I'm gonna check this one today and I'm gonna check this one today.
Yeah, because I think like I use everything like a web based, so I have a CRM that I use, and my memory is terrible. So like I put everything on there, and that's what keeps me organized, and we all run off of it. So I know another friend of mine that has done very well and grown his company and uses Excel spreadsheet, and I'm like, how? Like I just don't understand. And I mean, they have a system that works, and I'm sitting there, and in my head, I'm like, but this is like, because I can put out, tracking and calls. So if I had to reach out to you, I could reach out to you, put my notes in, I could move your call date out, and I'd just set it and forget it. And then you pop up 6 months later, 3 months later, a week later, whatever. I'm like, oh, that's right, Sue. Read the notes. I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm caught back up. So you have a system like that, right? You have a spreadsheet?
It's my system, or our system is really spreadsheets. Yeah.
So how many clients do you think you guys, I say clients, but possibility, I guess clients or whatever, relationships that you think maintain at any given time? And I know some of these are probably only once or twice a year, but.
Right. Oh, probably between 50 and 75 maybe.
That's pretty cool.
You're kind of,
I mean, the bigger clients too, they're,
right.
Fairly big, it's not just you're doing a quick transaction. Like you said, this takes some nurturing and relationship building and getting to know it.
And over time and just seeing them and hoping that when they really are ready to make that decision, that that we are top of mind. Oh, I should talk to those people down in Plattsburgh. Those nice people.
Do you think you guys have potentially gotten some people to commit here because knowing you or knowing Gary or knowing someone else that comes from the chamber and they see you, not Plattsburgh Chamber, but you personally, like over time they get to know Sue, or they get to know Gary.
Yeah, sure, because business is relationships, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you
exactly.
know that you're a real estate.
Yeah, it's all relationship building.
It's all relationship. It's the same in economic development. People like to do business with people that they feel comfortable with, people that they know that they're going to help them, people that are going to go that extra mile and say, oh, okay, well, I know your question was this, but have you considered this?
Yeah, and you built up the trust factor where some of these people, like you said, if it's 6 years, you're dealing with the same person for 6 years. Meaning if there's not there's turnover obviously in every company, but if you find that hey, we're always talking to Bill and Sue, and maybe I should use a different name than Sue, but Bill and Jane, and they know Sue, and they constantly know you, do you think that might, I would think it would sway them over potentially to Plattsburgh versus somewhere in maybe Michigan that might have proximity to Toronto.
If it can make sense, I mean, it has to make sense for them, right? I think that certainly they would like to do business with, and it's not just me. I mean, there's all the other people that they are forming relationships within our community as we set up meetings for them with other people who can help them, and so that is a community of people helping them, not just one person. And I think that makes a big difference. But it has to make sense for them. If the customer wants them next to them and they're in Texas, well, then you got to go to Texas.
Do you travel a lot?
Yeah, actually, not right now. Not right now, but
2019 and before.
Yeah, that has been one of the things that, as an economic developer, has kind of made it interesting, right? Is that I do travel.
How I mean, in a month, you're probably gone once or twice a month, for a week or couple of days?
A few days, mostly. We do some trips up to Canada. There'll be multiple days in normal times. Not right now. Or go to the shows in the big aerospace shows in Europe. Those are longer.
And you like to travel?
I do like to travel. I do. I've liked to travel since I was a kid, so it kind of works out.
So where do you? I mean, this is obviously, was that one of the reasons why you took the gig, or is this before the travel?
No,
was
I
even a
didn't
thing?
really even. No, when I started, there was no travel. I was going to.
You just wrote that in the job description.
I was
right?
going to South Plattsburgh. Yeah.
Hey, it's a heck of a trip, man. It's
Yeah, right.
Hope the roads are good, right?
Yeah, right. And
So
West Plattsburgh sometimes.
that's
Yeah.
so like, what's your favorite places to travel? You like an international travel? Domestic travel?
I do like international travel, though there are so many beautiful places to go in the United States. I've been in all 50 states because my
Really?
family liked to travel. So by the time I was, left home, I only had 3 states left to go to.
Are you from this area?
No, I'm not.
Where are you from?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Are you a Steel fan?
I am a
fan?
Steelers fan. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
That's fine.
it's Steel Town. Well, it was not anymore.
My uncle's a big Steelers fan, so I actually root for the Steelers. I'm a Giants fan, so like they're in the AFC, so I actually do root for the Steelers a lot.
Steelers fans and Cubs fans, we're kind of crazy. We just, it doesn't matter whether they're winning or losing.
Do you have a terrible towel?
I do not have a terrible towel.
Okay.
I do not have a terrible
We'll have to work on that. We'll have to see if we can ship you up one.
Right?
Is your family still down there?
No, my family is not. We moved when I was, I think, 13. My father was a researcher for Westinghouse. His job was to develop semiconductors. Started out in thyristors and transistors, and those before their semiconductors existed. And so he was a physicist. So he worked for Westinghouse, and he changed companies, went to work for General Electric. So we moved to the Syracuse area, and he worked on Carrier Circle in Syracuse. And then the semiconductor business it just goes up and down and up and down. And so during one of the downtimes, GE decided they didn't want to be in the semiconductor business anymore, and so he moved back to Pittsburgh to work for GE and Westinghouse, and another Japanese company formed a spin-off, and he went to work for them. But by that time, I was grown, and so I was off.
So did you graduate out in Syracuse?
Yeah.
And then college?
I didn't go to college.
That's great. That's fine.
I didn't. I went to a lot of things later on, college courses, but I didn't go to college right out of high school.
What did you do right out of high school then?
I got married.
Okay.
I got married went to North Carolina. He was a military man.
Do you find was that kind of taboo back then not to go to college, or was that?
Oh, my parents were very upset with me because they pictured me as the child. I was the eldest child, and I was the one who was always good in school. So I was the one who was supposed to go and do all that.
Well,
they were very upset with me.
So my son is 3. Our oldest is 3, and I was just talking to my wife something about like, go to I don't know. We always think about going into. Makes me feel. I know it sounds crazy, but it makes me feel old that he's looking at going into preschool or pre-K or whatever they're going into now. So. But we were talking about college, and my wife said something about not going to college, and I'm like, that'd be like, I went to college, and I was always one I probably shouldn't, but I shouldn't have for what I ended up doing. But it was one at 18 years old, you don't know what you're doing, so like, I guess I'll go to college because that's just kind of the natural step. Like my dad never went to college. I know a lot of people that didn't go to college, so I always ask people, where'd you go to school? And it's depending on generationally, it's. People your generation typically say, hey, I went to school or whatever. And same thing, I think a lot with my generation. I think my kids and stuff, there's going to be less and less saying I went to college. They probably have like I said, you do a lot with the internet now with courses and, whatever, going into, or even for like a year course or a trade or something like that, which I think is going to make a big comeback because a lot of the trade, again, this is my theory is that and you probably have seen this too, like the trades, there's a lot of people retiring out of the trades, and I don't know many of the trades.
You can make a lot of money working in this trade.
This is my thing. If real estate doesn't work out, my podcast career ends today. I mean, this is nothing. We're gonna I thought about going back, taking a year and learning like an apprentice, and just going and learning from a trade company, and then eventually opening up a business. 'Cause I like business, but something around where there's gonna be demand and I think plumbing and heating and electric are around for the long haul,
Oh, yeah.
And
plumbers make a lot of money.
I know. And I'm like, I'm in my head, like in the back of one of my gigs would be to try to figure out, and I don't know this stuff yet, but I'm like, if I can learn it and I can apply the basic techniques and get good at it and then kind of build, put the business on top of that. In my head, I'm like, that would actually be kind of a cool business. But you don't want me doing your electrical right now. I switch outlets, but I gotta learn it. It's like anything else, you have to learn it. But I have an interest in it because you got to look at where supply, especially in business. Like, I mean, what's going to be in demand in a few years versus what was. Like, you start seeing these things transitioning out. The trades, I think you're actually going to go see it go more because we're at such a there's not many people that can do it well.
I hope so. I think that there's an education element that needs to be done because people are not seeing, and their parents are not seeing, the trades as being something that can be a good career. And so they're not entering the careers that could be very profitable for them. College is a great thing. I love learning. So I went back and did learning things through colleges or other institutions and got certifications and all those kinds of things later in life. But college is not the path for everyone, and it's not the best path for everyone.
So how'd you get to Plattsburgh?
I came for a job. I was working at the IHOP in Auburn, New York, and
and just transferred up.
I transferred up.
So do you think that you were, because you said you went back and did your courses and you did stuff?
I went to the community college.
Yeah. But did you find that not being 18 years old when you would have went versus how old you were when you went, did you find that was enough time for you to really develop what you actually wanted to do?
I think,
or had at least an interest in?
I think when I went back to when I went to the community college, I just knew that I needed to learn some skills that could really help me to get good jobs, right? But when I went to get my certifications, it was because it supported what I'm doing. So when I went and got the certification to be a professional in human resources, so I could better understand human resource law, because a really big part of what companies needed to know, right? Mm-hmm. They need to know, how does this stuff all work, and how do I make sure that I'm complying and make sure that my policies are policies that can help me to retain and attract the people that I need. And then I got certified as an economic developer, which that one is a no-brainer, right? You need to.
This was after you had the economic development job. You were with the chamber at this point.
Yes,
okay,
right.
I was going to say that's a great foreshadowing. He did
no, the chamber and Gary was very supportive. He said, I want you to be able to do this, and we will help you to do that. So they gave me the time and the resources to be able to get those certifications.
And let me see, the status of certified economic developer by the International Economic Development Council.
Yes.
Okay, and again, we did a little background search on you, so we got very, very sophisticated search. Again, Google, thank you, but
Google's great. What did we do before Google?
I'll be honest, I was thinking that the other day. I'm having a phone on you at all times, and you just pull out and figure. Man, there's just simpler times when you just had to.
Yeah.
It's just funny. I mean, again, but the International Economic Development Council, is that the top economic, because it's international, but is that the big certification?
Yeah. There's only 1,100, I think, about certified economic developers in the world. Yeah,
and you're one of them.
It's a big, long process, but.
And this is something you have to renew?
Yeah, every 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, because I saw something, I think it was in one of the publications the North Country, the Chamber put out, and it said you had gotten recertified in whatever.
Yeah, it's just like a lot of other professions. In the real estate, you have to do, continuing education, and be involved in the field, and be involved in the organization. And I serve on the international committee of the International Economic Development Council. Of
that council?
Yeah.
Oh wow! So you're you can peacock a little bit. You're pretty big, high up within this.
I don't know about that, but
I mean, at the 1,100, if you're they're asking you to be on some stuff.
Yeah. Well, because for us, our economic development is chiefly international. It's cross border, right?
So how many? I guess this is, so 1,100 across the entire world. So, when you say international, I guess in the United States, how many? Most places, though, you think would have some type of international presence? It doesn't necessarily mean you're right next to Canada.
Sure,
I mean, you
sure.
could be like Middle America and have some
Sure. I mean, you look at
European
places
countries.
like Wichita. Okay, so
Yeah.
Wichita is big in the aerospace industry, and they have been for a long, long time. So they've got a lot of international companies that are there, and you don't think about that in Kansas, but yeah.
Are you have you become more fascinated with certain companies now being in, like having worked with them? Or is it just kind of like,
yeah.
I mean, do you find like you have a real big liking to like the aerospace now, or take like Novabus with like the buses? Like, do you find that not necessarily just the company, but what they actually do? Is that also
that's one of the most
interest?
fun things about my job is we get to go to all, and I know I'm a geek about it, but you get to go to all these places and see all these cool things that are made in our community. And in other communities as well, right? But, so you go and you say, wow, so we make this stuff that is used worldwide. We put stuff in planes that people fly on. We put, these buses. I was in Hawaii, right? I'm in Hawaii. I'm at this thing. It's this blowhole thing, right? Where you go and you look, and the
like
water,
a geyser kind of thing?
water hits the lava, and it shoots up, from the ocean, and I look down in the parking lot, and here's a Prevost bus, all wrapped in this, tropical tree leaf thing mode. And so I took a picture, and I said to everybody, "Look, there's a Prevost bus."
And that has to be made in Plattsburgh.
It was actually made in St. Eustache, which is their other plant. But Prevost makes buses here. And I was in China one time, and they took us on the fast train. They have this really, really, really fast train that goes from Shanghai to the airport. Right? Nobody really rides it except for the tourists. But it was a Bombardier train. It had Bombardier on the footplate as you walked in. Again, not made in Plattsburgh, but
the same company.
The same company.
It is pretty. It's kind of cool. Yeah, it is cool because it's like it almost feels like if you travel and see something that reminds you of home, it almost feels like you're like. It's like a comfort thing. It's like, that's like.
Oh, and if I was, it was in Albany one time, and there was a train, and the train actually said on the undercarriage, it said Plattsburgh, New York. That train was made right here at Bombardier, which is just, I don't know, it's just so cool.
I think Plattsburgh's got a different. When we talk about like, like a North Country pride kind of thing, like. Plattsburgh's small enough that it catches your attention. Where if you're in Wichita, you see Wichita, it probably doesn't jump out at you as much. If you're like, hey, it's built in Chicago, you're like, okay, well, there's so many things in Chicago.
Yeah.
You're like Plattsburgh, wait, like that's like an attention grabber.
The things that are made here, pieces of Boeing Dreamliner planes are made in Plattsburgh. The stuff that is on HGTV all the time, where you have the guys, they're all tiling, and they have that orange stuff on the wall.
Oh, yeah, Schiller.
That's Schluter, right? That's made here in Plattsburgh. The lighting is made at Swarovski.
I did my internship there, and I remember there was a couple, every once in a while you'll see, like, I remember they were in like the James Bond films where all the chandeliers that were made in Plattsburgh.
They were made in Plattsburgh.
Yeah, and it was, and I was I love James Bond movies, so as a kid, when I remember going there for college, as an internship, that was one of the things they said. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool that this is, it's literally made down in the warehouse down like, which is right on, and it's, so what do you think is the coolest thing made in Plattsburgh?
Oh, goodness gracious.
Or the thing that nobody would know that we make that you'd be like, you didn't know this was made in Plattsburgh, but it's a really, or would surprise people.
I think the titanium part that is made at Norsk. Mm-hmm. I don't think people know that those are made here. Norsk is relatively new. Now that's a Norwegian company, and so what they are making is a part that is made out of titanium in a whole new way. So normally, what they do when they make a part for a titanium part, and they use titanium because it's strong and because it's light. Mm-hmm. But it's also very expensive. And so what they do is they take this great big block of titanium and they squash it down so it's really, really dense. And this takes like a month. And then they have to take a machinery and they have to eat away at the edges of this thing till finally you get down to whatever size part it is that you're trying to make, which takes another couple of weeks. When Norsk makes a part, it doesn't even take a day to make this thing. It takes an hour or 2 hours. Or...
You've obviously been in the big warehouse, not warehouse, but the whatever they call it, the manufacturing part of Norsk. Like one is blinding because it's all white, but like if you have you seen like you must have seen like the laser?
Yeah.
When they like give you the glasses.
You give the glasses.
Yeah,
you get to
and
look at it.
you like look at it and it's like it's pretty bizarre. I mean, they show you like the finished product, but it's just like it's like perfectly to scale, and it's just like and I don't know how many of those. They call them plasma or whatever the machinery
it's plasma, yeah, because it's wire, and they actually melt the wire, and it drips onto it.
Yeah, it's like it's an incredible product, and they have like that little showroom you go through, and they're showing all the stuff, and it feels like a little museum. But it's bizarre when you drive by it, and it doesn't look any. It's a building, but when you walk in, it feels like you're in a sci-fi movie. And it's so cool because you're like, wow, just on the inside. Like you can probably Google it and see what the inside of Norse looks like, but it's I don't know if you can. Maybe. I think on their website they have so like you kind of like see a little bit of this stuff, but it feels very futuristic when you're in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
and a lot of the manufacturing facilities are like that, right? You know, I mean, you go into Bombardier and the trains, the way they move the trains. So you know, the alarm goes off, you know, burr, 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 and everybody moves out of the way, and then the train is actually lifted up by this huge crane, and it moves to the next station where more things are going to be done to this train as part of making a shell into a train, and it comes back down. So they move the trains, not the people.
Like just a big assembly line, but I get what you're saying, so the people can always stay in place.
The people stay in place, and the train, this great big huge train, moves from place to place.
I love the concept when the big companies are obviously running and doing their thing. It's like the amount of efficiency that they just like squeeze out of everything. And that's something I've tried, like perfect example, like Elon Musk obviously is like bolted into like superstardom over the last year. But like one of his things I've like watched about him is he always talks about trying to get to what is the absolute, I forgot what he called the term, but basically stripping it down to like the most simplistic part of a process and trying to make that as efficient as possible, where you're not you're not being distracted by all the bells and whistles, but like what is the true thing that we're trying to do? And that could be, like I said, time or efficiency of doing some part, but he tries to find, and again, I'm sure this is like a lot of companies, like the most efficient way. And obviously Bombardier is like, let's put this thing up, let's move it, let's like spin this all around and just drop it. And then like you said, it's easier to move that piece than it is to move all the people with their parts. Like everybody picks up a desk and like, shuffles with it.
They stay where they are, right? And they learn a bunch of different tasks, but then those are the tasks that they do, and they're good at. They get to where they're good at those tasks. At Nova Bus, there's one station where the train is turned upside down. They call it the rotisserie, so that the people can work on it without having to climb on the top of it, right? So
doing like a Michelangelo, like the painting on their back. They kind of just stand there.
You spin it around, and then you can work on it efficiently.
I went to Nova. So I went to Plattsburgh State for supply chain management.
Oh, yeah.
So global supply chain management was, and again,
Dr. Kim.
Yeah, all these.
Yeah.
I mean, great guys and gals. And the thing was, I didn't do it. I never ended up like going into that field, but like I'm still fascinated by a lot of these companies and what they do, because that was pretty much it. It was like the supply chain, the logistics. Yeah, it was all the process. And now I'm sitting there like, it's strategic, and like I like just the logistic aspect of moving, especially when you're talking international travel. And you're talking about trying to find like even titanium. We talk about the strength versus the weight, and trying to find the best way to do things. And everything's always evolving, but that's the kind of stuff I like strategic. I think I'd still enjoy what I went for college, but I think I didn't like the idea of like an office job. I think if I would have got into it, would have liked it more, but I like being out and about. And so I think it was just the more that, but I don't think it was the total job, the idea of the job. Like I think a lot of these companies, at least from a supply chain, are just very fascinating. And I'm sure this was, over 10 years ago, taking that to now, it's completely it's completely different. The stuff I learned back then is probably obsolete, or I wouldn't say obsolete, but there's a lot of has evolved over the last decade.
The concepts are basically the same. You've got to get a thing from one place to the other place. You have to have it all coordinated so all things are in the right place at the right time. You need them, but I'm sure the methods of how they do that are now so, technology has changed so many things.
Are you a big tech person?
I am, but I'm not exactly. I'm not that fantastic at it, but I love gadgets. I just love
you
gadgets.
Got an iWatch or Apple Watch?
I love gadgets.
Are you an Apple person?
I am now. As far as my
Do you have an iPhone?
I have an iPhone. And
do you have a MacBook?
No, I don't.
Okay.
In business we really kind of use.
XP or whatever they call
Microsoft.
it.
Yeah.
I'm an Apple guy, which is fine. It's just I always find when I text people and they have the blue, the iMessage, I get excited, and then when someone has green, I just feel like it never goes through. It's like my wife's an Android Samsung person, and she hates Apple, and I'm I only buy Apple stuff, and so it just makes it tough when you're doing group photos and stuff. My family's all Apple people, and then
you can just air.
I can't airdrop it to her.
I know, right?
I know. And so now every time I'm you're not in some of the text messages that I'm in to her.
I can't just airdrop my stuff.
Yeah, I know. So it's I will not. Neither of the other will convince the other person. She has a better chance of probably convincing me to go back to Microsoft than I will get her to Apple. Because again, I told you she's competitive and very,
there you go.
God love her, but she can be thick-headed. So, what is? Well, you kind of said I guess. What is your favorite thing about the work? I think you might have answered that when you talked about seeing all the gadgets, and not gadgets, but seeing all the stuff people do and make up here. But
no, actually, my favorite part of this job is that it helps other people have jobs. And that's why I originally went into it. Is the situation, at that time was that people were losing their jobs, and if I do my job and the team, the community of people who are involved in workforce development and economic development, if we do our jobs well, then other people have jobs and they can support their families and they can be comfortable and have good lives.
So what's the focus of company? Because I always look at it, and again, this is if someone says, "Hey, we're creating jobs," and then some people say. You always hear the adage of well, yeah, but a lot of them are entry level or whatever job. When you talk about whether it be a factory worker or assembly line person, but I always look at it to me, bringing jobs to the community is always a better thing than not bringing jobs because you need everybody to run a whole system. Because you got to look at there's always going to be people in entry level jobs, whether they're kids out of college or whether they're students or whatever it might be, and then you have people all the way up to the highest levels that have been doing it for years and years and years that have risen through or done whatever they need to do. So when you hear jobs and stuff, is obviously is the quality of the job? I'm sure that matters, but quantity and quality, how does that spectrum fall?
It's changed over the years, and I think economic development programs that governments have not really kept up as well as they could have. Because now when you create new companies, some of them are very, it's a big project. It has a lot of investment. It will create a lot of opportunities in the community, but not necessarily with their own company, right? So it may only create 5 jobs or 6 jobs or 7 jobs, but allows other things to happen that will create more jobs or more entry-level jobs or those kinds of things. So I think we need to look at each project individually and not necessarily try to say, but how many jobs does it create? 80 jobs or does it create 8 jobs? But if those 8 jobs are good quality jobs and those 8 jobs help us in a way that we need to do other things, then those 8 jobs are just as important. And I think not just our government, but governments countrywide and probably worldwide are just not really, they've not figured out how to measure that.
Do you find, is it easy to do business in New York State and United States? In roughly what you're trying to do? Because you hear companies going overseas for whether it be cheaper manufacturing or cheaper, and do you find, or production of something, do you find that like, where do you find it's easy doing, I guess, business and economic development as United States citizen, and then also New York relative to other states and then relative to other countries? Or do you think there's challenges to it?
I think there are challenges with any economic development project, and you need to figure out what is the best thing for the community and what's the best thing for the company, and sometimes it's a combination of things. A company may make some of the things here in the United States and some of the things in other countries, and there are a lot of reasons for that. It could be that it's cheaper to make them. It could be because it's near to something that they need to have in order to make it. It could be because there's a specialty in that particular thing in that particular country, and so it makes sense for them to be there. That's the whole concept behind clusters. So we have a transportation cluster, right? And the transportation cluster is built over time since Bombardier first came here in 1995, and grown and grown and grown and grown, and you gain things from that. Then you have people who are familiar with the ways to work in those companies. You have a skilled workforce, so that's important. That's why there's a lot of pharmaceutical in Philadelphia. That's why there's a lot of tech in California. Here we have built this transportation cluster, so the schools teach the Institute for Advanced Manufacturing teaches the things. Then these people, if there's a downturn in one company and there's an upturn in another company, okay, they can move from one to the other. They keep their jobs, so you've gained a stability in the workforce for the community people who need a job, who need to be able to have a consistency in their pay so that they can pay their mortgage and they can do all the things that they need to do. So you gain, and the companies gain as well. They know, okay, there's a workforce here. Now I have to compete with the others for that workforce, but there is a workforce there that knows how to do these jobs.
So when you talk about like clustering, which is the idea of you have your main, like I said, transportation, manufacturing, but then you have all the little companies that support the big companies.
Right.
And not to mention in different industries of transportation. Mm-hmm. So do you find like kind of you familiar with the 80-20 rule? Mm-hmm. Do you guys find that you put like your
oh yeah.
That yes, manufacturing.
It works in anything.
Yeah. So I figured as much. Like, do you find that you guys are really, really just put a focus on manufacturing and just said, hey, we know that's our bread and butter, and we're just going to keep hammering that out? Obviously open to new companies coming in, but do you put most of your focus on what you already have built this massive advantage within one sector? Like if all of a sudden someone say like a pharmaceutical or tech, or like a couple of those other companies you mentioned said, hey, we want to open a tech company in Plattsburgh. You're obviously going to welcome them with open arms, but are you guys actively going out and trying to find those people? Or are you more like, hey, listen, we know we're really good at our strategic advantages in the manufacturing sector. Let's keep doubling down on that until we find that we have to pivot?
So I think when we look at what business is it that we're in, so the economic development community and the Chamber of Commerce economic development effort, the business that we're in is Quebec, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter which sector they're in if they need to be in the United States and we present to them a geographic advantage where they can say, okay, well, I will put my operation in Plattsburgh, and that will be my entry into the U.S. market. So, and to some degree, that's really our concentration. And although there are certainly a lot of transportation companies, and we do concentrate on that, mm-hmm. I think overall, if you look at the companies that we have, although there is this cluster, there's also all these other things like we were talking about. We're making chandeliers, and you think of Schoenbeck from Swarovski now. Mm-hmm. Now we think of it as being a U.S. company, but they actually came from Canada. Wyeth came from Canada, and a lot of the companies that we think of as being U.S. companies, like Wabtec. Okay, that's Westinghouse Airbrake, okay, U.S. But it came here from Canada. It didn't come from the United States.
What were they doing with the Wyeth property? Do you know?
The Wyeth property is now owned by a company called ERS, and they're redeveloping it as a multi-tenanted complex.
Is it? Do you know what the tenants are going to be roughly, or is that still open?
Well, they I think they're also they have a lot. Every one of these has assets that help them in certain areas. So one of the things that Rouse's Point has, is just like the city of Plattsburgh, is they have very inexpensive electricity.
Yep.
Right. So anything that is dependent on electricity or uses a lot of electricity is a good prospect for them. But back to the transportation. The reason that we focused on transportation is because it does bring so many other businesses to it. And so really, it is manufacturing, but it's an integrator. So mostly those companies like Novabus and Bombardier, they don't make a whole lot of their own parts, right? They buy them from everybody else. And so that's why you end up with, and somebody asked, which Joel asked me actually just a couple days ago, we were going for a walk at lunch, and he said, what was your favorite project, in your career? And I said, no. I had to think about it for a while because there've been a lot of them, and I really enjoyed a lot of them. But I think that the Novabus project was my favorite because I was involved from beginning to end, for one thing, and because we knew that project was going to, like the Bombardier project, but I wasn't involved in the whole Bombardier project because I wasn't there, that it was going to create all of these other jobs and other businesses to come. And so after that part was over, then we were down the street talking to the people who make the wiring harnesses, and then we're talking to all these people who make the handrails. You don't realize how many things go into the things that we just, you get on a train or a bus. You don't think about it. You sit down on the seat and that's it. But somebody's making the seat. Somebody's making the handrail. Somebody's making the sign that tells you when to get off the train.
I've thought about that stuff, like just manufacturing, where you just like stare at something and you're just like, how? That's the most simplistic thing. I'm like, how do they make that, or how does this work? And it was like, when you just sit there and think about like this thing, how does this recorder work? And then really start to kind of understand like the idea that you can talk, and then it can like somehow, and I know this is like me dumbing it down, but like can hear your voice, record your voice, and then I can pull it out and replay it. And I'm like, it's probably simple for the person that understands it, but I'm like, that is such a crazy technology. And then when you strip it back, however long ago, I don't know, 50s, 20s, I don't know when they started coming out with like recording stuff on, like back to like who thought of the idea that you came up with a system? Because it's not like these parts were made. Like it was like you just assembled it and like, oh, this works. It's like someone had to create whatever came to record. And again, it's a Google search away. I can figure it out. But I always am fascinated by it, and I have no time to Google all this stuff. But it's just like, sometimes I do Google this stuff. Usually when I'm watching a movie, I'll go.
Oh yeah, you say, what about that?
I go into a very, very dark rabbit hole on Wikipedia when I'm watching a movie, because I'll look it up, I'll look at the actor, then I'll look at something. Oh, this was shot in this community. I go to there.
Oh, he was in that too.
Well, the next thing I know, I'm looking at how a pen is made, because if I go and then I start like clicking, I'm like, how did I get here? And you go back. I'm like, oh, that's right, you're watching that movie. And I'm like, how did I get that? Like, and I was watching. You watch Ozark? Have you seen?
No, I don't. No.
I'm not a big movie person, or series person, but I ended up watching Ozark, and great show. But every episode, I was reading the synopsis of Wikipedia, because that's usually I'm like not half paying attention. But I was like going down some roads there. I'm like, how am I? Like, I'm looking up like half the thing was shot in Georgia, and I'm sitting there researching lakes and water levels in this Georgia thing, and I'm like, how did I get to this? I'm like, I got to get out of this place. Like, I'm learning about
Has anybody talked to you about your attention span?
Oh, it's terrible. So you're talking to me for over an hour. Like I'm all over the place. But yeah. So no, I just I like searching and stuff. But that's
yeah.
We'll go back to what you're talking about. So so Novabus, that was the big process from start to finish, and that was
working with all, and we still do, right? I mean, it's a
very active.
Yeah, I mean, now you're still, this company is going to be or wants to have a contract with Novabus. So we talked to them, and how could we accommodate their needs to be here, and could we get them near Novabus, which is what Novabus wants. Novabus would like them right close, so that the time is cut down for how long to get the stuff to them.
Novabus was built probably 2010. Mm-hmm. 8, 9, 10?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I toured it right around that time, and I think it was fairly new at the time.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember
it's a
exactly.
massive facility.
It is. Well, it's bigger than it was because it
goes farther back now.
They built the Prevo end on the end of the building.
Yeah,
and then they built the customer service center where
that little showroom.
Yeah, it's a showroom.
The cube or whatever.
Yeah, so when the customer who's bought and Bombardier does the same kind of thing, although they don't have a separate building, but the customer comes in and looks at it and says, well, I like that, but there's a little area over here where you need to get that tape fixed up.
That's like the Macy window, right?
Yeah.
They just throw up their products out there. Yeah. It's kind of cool. You drive by and you see now. Do most of the buses that they make, do they change at all? I should say design-wise. I mean, do they make a one-size-fits-all bus?
No.
You said hey, we want to have some specs. Maybe it's more narrow or longer, or seats are a little bit different.
You start out with all of these things. You start out with kind of a standard thing, but then the customer says, well, I'd like a 36-seat configuration, and I want 2 handicaps, and then I'd like for it to be so that you could put bikes on it because we're in a tourism area or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you end up with that. And then now there's the new electric buses and the hybrid buses and all of that. So
I think that's fairly new though, right?
Yeah. So there were, and that's another example. So there are companies now that are in New York, but not necessarily in Plattsburgh, that they're working with, and that now you have people coming in and out. So even if they're not physically located here, so BAE is making the batteries for the buses, right? So those batteries, and they have the things that they need to do or design changes that they need to make. So here's some BAE people coming in, or you have people flying in from someplace, the engineers, to look at things. And there was a crew from Bombardier, they were going in and out to do things, design things. And when I was flying out of Plattsburgh one time.
How's the flight out of Plattsburgh? I mean, do you like flying out of Plattsburgh?
It's good.
I love it. So
it's so easy, right?
Do you do a lot with DC, or is it just because that's a good hub for you to
DC,
redirect?
A lot of the government things are in DC. So whenever I need to do things that are, government related,
like the easiest flight in the world.
Oh, yeah, right?
That was an hour and 20 minutes, maybe? Hour and a half?
Yeah, something like that.
It's not that. It was less than what I thought it was. I thought it was going to be about 2 hours to get there, and I think they're like, oh, no, you're up and down in an hour and 15 minutes.
It's
oh, okay.
Great. Then you don't have to make changes, and it's small enough that, and we have because it's such a new airport, we have technology in that airport that I was telling we were talking to.
This is Plattsburgh?
Yeah, I was talking to the people from Smart Chiller, from the blue the ribbon cutting, They were talking about flying into Plattsburgh. So, and they were talking about it too. They said, there are things that we have in that airport that airports that are twice our size don't have. Like, the exit when you come through, and it's the glass doors and they close behind you, and you just walk through.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you go to the right of the check-in line?
Yeah. They have those in Paris, but they're not as good. Those are not as new. They have those in Vancouver, but they're not as new. They're not as good.
They're shutting down kind of early in April, right? To
repave, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's repaving. Okay.
Yeah. So the middle of the runway needs to be repaved now. They repaved one end a few years ago, and they didn't need to shut down for that. But when you're repaving the middle,
the main,
you kind of you don't have enough room on either end to land and take off and stuff.
So I'm just, because we have to go to we're going to Florida in April. And then we're coming back. We have to fly into Albany. So it's like this whole logistical thing to get back, because we can't fly right into Plattsburgh.
You can't fly right, yeah. But this is a good time to do it, because right now with the pandemic, there's not as much traffic.
Oh, for sure.
Let's do it now.
Yeah.
And then once the pandemic is over and traffic increases, they'll be done. And this should last, I forget what they told me, something like 15, 20 years. I don't know, something like that.
It's, excited. I mean, when did the current airport, when was that built?
So it opened in 2007. The first flight was in November. It was a Legion flight in 2007.
Where did it go? Was it Florida?
It went to Florida, yeah.
God, it does. It seems...
Well, Gary and I went out to Bellingham, Washington in 2004, I think, or 2005, to talk to the people in Bellingham about how they were operating their airport, because they're close to Vancouver and Seattle and Victoria, and so they had a lot of cross-border traffic, and they had Allegiant, and so we knew that Allegiant understood how that worked, that even though we were a small market, we'd be drawing from a big market. And so now we here in Plattsburgh all have the benefit of being able to fly directly to Washington, D.C. because there is this bigger market.
Was it like 70% of the people are from Canada that fly?
I think it's more than that.
More than that, yeah. I mean, it is crazy because it's really international when you go, and especially when I've only done it a couple times. You take like that red-eye flight to Florida, which is terrible. And at 2 a.m, you just hear your eyes are glazed over, and you're like, I don't know where I am right now. And then all you hear is just like French, but it's cool because it's like, you kind of get lucky and you show up and you don't know somebody on the plane. And usually you know 1 or 2 people, but it's still the idea when you go out of Plattsburgh. It's not like you're just flying next to your neighbors. It's truly. People all over the country. And it's funny, I've been sat next to people that are from New Hampshire. Remember a guy I sat down, he's like, yeah, we flew out of here. It was better than going to Boston or going to wherever, which is pretty cool, and I think I'm excited because I say 2007, I didn't even know it was that old, but it's grown so much in 13, 14 years. And I always look at, okay, so take 13, 14 years from now, same airport, I'm sure this thing is going to be, because there's space to expand for sure, right? Going kind of back inside.
But when this latest expansion was done, it was done to accommodate a growth. So without increasing the footprint now, a pretty significant amount of growth can happen in the number of people who fly in and out of there every year.
Because then they start talking about like international travel. Like I've heard Europe, and Gary, we'll say, teased it a little bit when he was on that potentially that is something that. I don't know if you can speak more to it, but like going to, I think London was the potential. I don't know if that's... there's so many things going on now, and the pandemic has just really changed so many things. But I'm certain we have the infrastructure now to be able to do international flight. And even though there's not commercial international flights, you don't see it, but there's all this business travel going on. Through Plattsburgh International Airport, and they're being cleared here in Plattsburgh. This is commercial flights?
This is private flights.
Oh, private. Okay.
Business flights, or charter flights, those kinds of things. They're coming in and out. It was
Norse, wasn't that a big thing? A lot of the people from Norway could fly and connect into Plattsburgh.
They can, or the other thing that...
Well, I mean, not directly, but I'm saying they can do like a Dulles into Plattsburgh kind of flight.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing is that for the things the flights that you can't get right out of Plattsburgh, we're only an hour from Burlington. We're only 60 miles from, maybe 70 miles from
was it Trudeau?
Trudeau, yeah. Airport de Montreal.
Wasn't there 2 of them up there?
There was, yeah.
And then they just closed, and then they moved.
That one is used now.
Was it Laval?
It was that one was Mirabel.
Mirabel,
and that is used now for there's manufacturing out there and that kind of thing.
So it just merged. Was that recently or no?
That was quite a while ago, 10 years ago maybe.
Okay, because I remember
it kind of worked out for them.
Okay, because maybe when I was a kid, I remember the 2, and I always went out of the Pierre Trudeau
international flights used to go out of Mirabel, and so I flew out of there a couple of times for that, but it just never. It's kind of like the
I've
in
flown,
city and out of city.
Well, I remember I had to go to California a couple times, and we took a direct flight from. We could take a flight out of Burlington and go to like Chicago or go to like wherever the connecting hub was, and fly down to like a regional airport in Southern California to go to Anaheim, or you can go to Montreal and take a direct flight right to LAX, and then half hour, 40-minute, taxi, Uber ride, and you were where you had to be. Mm-hmm. So it was always like, we usually just went up to Montreal and just flew the direct flight because 4 hours, 5 hours, usually longer going there, quicker coming home with the tailwind, but it was, a pretty fast flight. And again, you don't have to have the layovers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you like layovers? No? As I've gotten older, or I guess people that travel a lot don't like them. When I was a kid, I used to love layovers because you just people watch and get to like just check it all out. But then as you get older, you're kind of like, dude, I just want to get there.
To me, layovers are an opportunity for delay.
Yes. I mean, even if everything goes on track, I always like the people aspect, the people watching. But now as I've gotten older, I'm like, listen, dude, time. Like, I just want to get there. Yeah. Let me just get to my thing. Now, are you a phone person? When I say phone person, do you text people? Mm-hmm. Okay. That was my question. I had to throw it out there because Gary told me he doesn't text.
If you want to talk to your grandchildren, you can only do that by text because they don't talk on the phone.
I actually had on this. Do you phone or do you just email like Gary? Because Gary says he emails. And then he emailed when we got back to his office and he said, see, by email. And I said, that's perfect.
He does. He emails.
He said, no, he said he really only emails or calls.
Yeah, okay, he'll talk on the phone. But actually, most of his communication is by email.
Yeah, and he said he doesn't text. I said,
he doesn't text at all.
Totally fine. Now, a question I'm kind of curious for you because how has being, especially back in the 90s, and I don't know I don't know how things were back in the 90s.
It's ancient history.
Well, I listened to music still from the 90s, so I think now I know why my parents listened to like the 60s and 70s music. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, like I get it. I'll concede to that. How has being a woman in business changed from then to now? Do you find that had any issue, or do you find when you came in the 90s, was that like something you had to, compete with, or did you find it was very not as?
So. When I started doing things with the Chamber of Commerce, now, I owned a business. I did a lot of things that were maybe not traditional for women, even in the 80s. But when I started working with the Chamber, even as a volunteer, I was always the youngest person in the room.
Well, that's my other question. That's where I was going to go next, but keep going. Yeah,
I was the youngest person, the woman in the room, and usually there was me, or maybe me and one other woman. Carolyn Harding was involved in the chamber at the time. She was in tourism, and over time now, when you go to meetings, maybe more than half of the people in the room are women, and I am no longer the youngest. The room. No, I'm usually the oldest.
You say the oldest. I'm like this guy.
No, but I'm definitely not the youngest anymore.
You're part of the season, the veterans.
I'm a baby boomer. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah. Well, I was just curious because, like, I know, kind of just talking about when you talk about the background of like, going to, getting married and going to school and kind of being in the military and then kind of jumping into a different career, and I was like, how old were you when you got the current position you're in?
Oh, well, okay, let's see. I was
about 30?
Yeah, about that. Yeah. Well, no, wait a minute. Okay. No, I must.
We're not going to give your age away, but we'll let people do the math if they had to.
Well, we've just determined I just turned 65, so I was born in 56, so I was what?
40?
I was almost 40. Yeah. The thing I think that for me was I never thought, wow, I'm the only woman in the room. It just never occurred to me. Now I look back on it and I see it. But I always just assumed that if I did good work, that then I could be there. Well, and that I was entitled to be there.
The only reason I ask is because you hear a lot, and again, rightly so, but you hear a lot now of like, women when they get into positions, it's still, almost it's almost like a point to say we have like a woman's in this position, or the board has this many people. Mm-hmm. And I just grew up, I had sisters, I grew up like I had a lot of friends that were female in my life that I just always worked with girls. And like here I have a lot of women that work at I just never think twice of it. So like I always find like you in I would say a pretty prominent position that not necessarily now, but when you started was probably more male dominant. I didn't know if there was
completely male dominated. There was no. I mean, I would go to so I owned a restaurant. I was the female franchisee, right? Mm-hmm. There were very few free and people sometimes that I'd check in and they'd say, "So, do you want to sign up for the spousal activities?" So no, my husband will be signing up for the spousal activities.
Yeah,
well, but it was just I don't know. Maybe I wasn't smart enough to realize that I was that people were not thinking that was okay. But I just never really let it bother me.
Yeah, I just asked because I know like the time period, and again, the time period is different, but still like I just always look at, like you said, like if they're the best for the position, they should be the one. It's like, and that's, it's just it's a weird concept that somebody, especially back then, like into now, I'm sure it's, like you said, completely different. You walk in and you're one of the seasoned women in the group, and there's plenty of
them, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of them. So, I just didn't know if that was,
and I think that it's also, it's some career paths are easier than others for women even now. Right, I mean, although we were at the Smart Chiller place the other day for the ribbon cutting, and the welder was a woman.
Yeah,
and that is a profession that you do still kind of think of as being a man. But I think more and more women are starting to enter. Being a ref in the NFL, you betcha.
Yeah, the grown
right?
Super Bowl.
Or a kicker or whatever. It's there. These barriers are coming down. I think there are still barriers for women, and we don't want to overlook that there are those. But I think that certainly in some professions you now see a majority being women.
I think it's a generational thing too. Like if the generation that's going into the workforce now is used to more more equality, that I think that a lot of the social norms start to change over time. And it's always happened. I think, you go back to like the 1800s to the early 1900s to the 60s to now, it's like things just transition, which I always joke because there's a few girls I know that are just very bold. I call bold personalities in a good way, but I'm like, you're never going to get pushed around. Like you're going to, like you push me around. I'm like, scared of you. So it's like, but I find that there's it's that in the fact that you had mentioned being young in a profession that was probably, I had that when I got into real estate. Like I was 20 years old, and I always tell people I look like I was 15, and you're like, yeah, kid, you can come sell my house for me. And that's why I got to keep my beard a little bit because I got a baby face. But but it's my wife's like, you do not shave. Like it's about as low as the beard gets just to keep my marriage intact, because otherwise it's not good. She's older than me, which is great, but we just don't shave. So, what was the idea like going in? That was something I had to get over the first few years. And a lot of it I think was self-inflicted on myself because it was my thought that I was young. But I don't think I had to really necessarily be young. I think it was lack of confidence in knowing what I was talking about because I had to learn it. I was like, okay, I'm picking up on stuff, but I really give me about 5 years to really kind of understand the industry, which luckily I did. But it was that first few years, it's like you had to, I dressed different. I dressed nicer because I was like, okay, if I don't look good,
I have to look older. I have to look more professional.
And
right?
now people it's funny. Nicole here, there's someone kind of come to me like interview tomorrow for a job, and she's like, "Josh, I'll dress up." I'm like, "Listen, I'm wearing this. Like, they can take me as I'm pretty low key basic when I dress." So I said, this is how you're gonna get me. You're gonna get me my true Galen look. What is, I guess, the other thing, tagging off to you starting a new career at 40, like what advice would you give someone that's maybe in their 20s or 30s? Because 20s is a very up and down time in people's lives, especially when you're a young professional, because you have no clue what you want to do and you're really not established and you're kind of just trying to find your footing. Do you have any advice to that, or in regards to different career paths or starting a brand new career path, like I said, at 40, and then having success and longevity in the current position? And are you one that's like, you're just going to keep doing this until it's not fun anymore kind of person?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Gary gave me the same answer. I said, Gary, you're not retiring, right? Like,
no,
he's like,
and people ask me that, so when are you going to retire? And I say, well, when it's not fun anymore,
exactly.
I really just love my job. And there are the days when I'm tired and I go, oh my goodness gracious. But yeah, sure. But then there's too many good things about it, But I think for advice for young people is to be open to opportunities when they arise, right? Did I think I was going to be an economic developer when I grew up? Now, most people don't even know what an economic developer is. And I think you could talk to just about any economic developer, and they would not have said as a child that that's what they wanted to be. But to be open to an opportunity, see if that opportunity is something that you're interested in. See if that's an opportunity that fits where you want to be. Is it something you think you would enjoy? Is it something that can be a career for you, at least for some time? And then, as far as changing when you're in your in your 40s, that is, I think, looking at what you have. What is it? What is the value that you can give to a company or a career or an opportunity?
Do you think that it makes a difference in what you're doing also? Like you said, like what you can give back, but you could see the purpose of it, or you could see like how this makes a difference.
For me, that was important, and I think for a lot of people, it's important,
Mm-hmm.
and especially today. I think a lot of young people really want to be able to make a difference in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So they like to work in places where they can make a difference, where they will be heard. Where the other thing that I would recommend, though, is that as a young person, you don't get to start at the top.
Yeah.
And so you can work there, but at first you may not be. Oh dear, I just
you're
terrible
fine.
noises.
You're fine.
Yeah, it's because I talk.
That's
with
what
my
I think.
hands,
I'm hoping that this maybe doesn't, but I don't want to touch it because I'm scared it's going to not fall off.
Yeah, right.
You're fine. You got Italian in you or no?
No.
Okay. I'm Irish, but I talk my hands all the time.
English, almost all English, Irish, and Scottish and Welsh and all those.
I talk my hands too, so I'm Irish, but there's a few of us out there.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that being willing to learn, being willing to get to where you are later on, you've learned now the industry, right? And you now have something to contribute. You now have the ability to have your own business, to do those kinds of things. But you don't start out there. You don't start out with the high salary and the big house and the.
So do you find one, putting in the work and like the time? Because I've been doing this for 11 years. This is my 11th year in real estate, which, again, I started when I was 20. I mean, it took probably till I was 25 before I really started to grasp the industry. And then I've gotten to the point now where I'm like you, like, what's my next challenge? So my challenge is like, okay, like real estate, just selling real estate to me can get boring, because to me it's like, I'm just like, I got good at it. It's just repeating the motions over and over again. So now I'm like, how can I challenge myself? So now it's like, okay, like, and there's levels that I'm trying to work on that is like the next level for me, but it's because I can't sit still. So it's like, I gotta like do the next thing, and I gotta, constantly challenge myself. But do you find that, I say committing,
some real estate people go into economic development?
Maybe. Like, and this is the thing when you talk about like giving back. Like, I just signed up for my first board in years because I got out of it, and I don't want to be like, again, this is not like, don't ask me to be on all these boards. I would love to. I plan on giving back. I got 3 kids under.
But you have time. You have to have time.
Well, yeah, I got 3 kids that are 3 and younger. So this is the only one, because it's like there's a bunch of other parents and it fits like perfect. So I was like, it works. But one of my goals when I get older is to transition more into stuff that's going to better the area. Like, it's kind of like, okay, get my knowledge now, kind of get established, meet people, like you said, relationships, and like understand and pick people's brains that are doing it now, so we can kind of build off of it in the future. And I like that stuff. That's why I think I'm fascinated by stuff you do, stuff that Gary does, stuff that Chamber, and stuff that there's a few people I want to dive into, at TDC and all those companies that, are doing this, but it's like understanding, how to build up the area, not just like one person, but how do you affect more people? And that's the one thing that I've always looked at as I've gotten older. Again, this wasn't 10 years ago. I was not thinking this way. I was thinking like, what's the easiest way not to, have to work this job or whatever. But I think when you talk about like committing do you think commitment is tough? Like, did you have a hard time committing to a new job at 40? And the reason I say that is because like some kids I know, this is more because I know some people that listen to this are like in their 20s and in their 30s, and sometimes are nervous about committing into a job because like, well, I'm comfortable, it's a little bit of a risk. And this is, I'd have the same reservations if I was jumping into a new career. Did you have that, or do you find that yes, I did have it, but I just like trusted my gut and made the plunge and tried to figure it out?
So I think that I only do things all in. So
I love it. See, that's the best answer you've given all. I mean, your answers are great, but that was my most. I enjoyed that.
So I guess I didn't have any problem with and I'm trying to figure out what else would I was. That just wasn't something that I considered.
So it was like, good idea. Let's just go for it.
Go for it. Yeah.
I love that. No, that's great. I think I just know there's a lot of people that I've had conversations with friends. And like, I'm maybe looking at a new job. I'm kind of, nervous. Like, it's not really, you can tell they're nervous. They won't maybe not say it, but like you can get to the general gist of like they're nervous to make the plunge to a new career.
So I think one of the things that, kind of to that is when you were saying, the advice, don't be afraid to make a mistake once in a while, that thing that you're doing this, if it turns out that doesn't work out, what else could you do with that? Or what else could you do that's related to that? Or because I think people, when they look at say like manufacturing, well, okay, I'm going to work on the floor, but there's so many things that I've never worked in manufacturing, but there's so many jobs that you can have in manufacturing that have nothing to do with working on the assembly line, right? There's people in human resources, there's people in engineering, there's people in accounting, there's people, all of these professional careers that are associated with that, but that are not what you normally think. And I think almost all careers, when you look at economic development, so I'm a generalist, right? I do everything. But there are people who focus only on finance, or they focus only on development of downtowns, so there are a lot of different areas within most careers that you can be in.
So in a normal day today, how do you roll into a meeting? And I think the reason I'm saying that is, I know when we talked about like being nervous when you started out. When I first got into real estate, like I was nervous going into appointments because I was like, I wasn't confident in myself, you know, and I had that, reservation of like, maybe they're going to ask a question I can't answer, or like maybe I'll see, I don't know what I'm talking about.
That makes me nervous if I don't know my subject.
So one, you prep and prepare, and a lot of it is through experience, but also through just like, you might have to just like dive into a certain specific topic the week of or something, or 2 weeks of, or whatever, a month before. Are you pretty easygoing when you go to meetings? Are you like to have fun in meetings? Are you like a very like down to business person? Like, which I would, again, give you an example. I go into meetings, I try to have fun. I'm pretty much, I sometimes have a tendency to get quick to the point, but sometimes I gotta, like, depending on the person, sometimes tone it back a little bit. I usually get excited. I try to have a little more I try to have fun with it. I don't like going in and being like stiff. But I also am not afraid to joke around. I'm not afraid to make a mistake. I'm not afraid to stumble on something. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm pretty confident that any problem that comes up, I can probably figure out a solution or get us into the path for a solution. Like, what's your demeanor in like meetings and like projects or pitches or anything like that?
Well, I think it depends on the situation and what you're doing. I mean, it's a lot different being in a meeting with 15 people, and we're going to write a strategic plan and for the organization. Okay, then you can be more informal. and I think you need to know who you're talking to, right? If I'm meeting with a set of business people who are considering our area, what is their demeanor, right? So if they're very formal, if they're very, what's the numbers? What's this? What's that? I want the answer. I want to be done. I want to get to the next thing. Well, then that's the way that I need to conduct, because that's what they're open to, right? If they're a tech company that's got a whole bunch of people that play ping pong in the
lounge,
break room. Okay, well, now then you're a little more informal about it, because they don't want to be it may not be about the numbers for them. It may be about, do you have places where you can hike? When Norse came, when he's not with the organization, but the president at the time came to look at the sites. We took him to all of these sites, and there's water, and there's a sewer, and there's electricity, and he's like, I like that one. It has a really good view of the mountains. That's where they are.
Yeah.
They're where the really good view of the mountains
in Norway
is. No, right? In Plattsburgh.
Yeah, but is Norway have mountains?
Yeah, sure.
I thought he was meaning like
Scandinavia.
I was saying skiing and stuff. I thought
right,
that memorandum of home maybe. Whatever, it worked.
It worked, right?
Let's capitalize.
That's the one I want, and he really wanted to be way out on the end, where it would have cost $1 bazillion to get the water and the sewer down there and the electricity. So he finally did say, well, okay, we can get a little closer to the road.
So it's like a normal real estate guy. I want that. I was like, let's bring it back down.
Let's bring it back down a little bit. Maybe you can't afford that, but for different people, different things are important. Not that you don't, like when I conduct a meeting and I'm in charge of a meeting and I'm running the meeting, I tend to be pretty businesslike. I want to run the meeting, I want to be efficient, I want to get the meeting over and move to my next meeting.
Well, the first time I ever heard you speak and Gary speak, I was doing the North Country Connections, it was probably a couple years ago now, and you guys were sitting up and you're talking about the economic part. And you guys both sat at the table, and I remember I was like pumped because it was like economic stuff. Like I kind of liked it. So I sat like in the center, and I think I asked Gary a question. He answered, and Gary didn't know who the heck I was at the time. And but it was one where like you guys were pretty, I would say pretty business. I mean, it was kind of like you guys are putting on the event, so it was a little more chill than it would be. Young professionals that are kind of just like, oh, I'm so like.
Oh, it was the ADKYP or what?
No, it was just North Country Connections, a thing.
The
staff does, and you do the networking, and so it was like an hour presentation. The two of you sat up there and you ran through some topics, and we had questions, and I think I asked some real estate questions to you guys, and that was the first time I heard either of you talk in person. Like I've heard stuff, but so it was just. But you guys, I would say we're more towards the business and the casual side, but it was probably not as businessy as maybe if like we were with a bunch of execs that were like deciding on a property. It was like you're in our house kind of thing. And we're just kind of chit chatting with you. But so two more questions for you. One is obviously you have to stay up to task on a bunch of stuff. Like how do you consume your information? Like, are you a big reader? Are you big, like we've mentioned podcasts before?
I am a big reader. And it's if I'm going to get my news, let's say I want to be up to date on what things are happening, I would actually prefer to read it than to watch it on video, because I control what I am going to look at. Right? If you have a video, well, I can glance through it, and I guess this is because I'm old fashioned and that's the way I learn. But okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, good. I don't need that part. Okay, that's interesting. I'll read that. But on a video, that's controlled by someone else. It's flowing through, and I've got to listen to the whole thing, because there might be a part that's interesting, but I'm not in control, right? If I fast forward, I might miss something, So I really prefer to read it.
And what sources do you normally, day to day, do you check?
Well, I read the Press Republican. That's my local news, and I need to know what's going on in my community. And I usually watch the news. Now that just negated my whole I don't like video, but I do like to watch the local news and local, let's see what's going on. And then I have a bunch of different newsletters and things that I read. from the industries that I read. And then I usually have news feed on my phone. There's a news feed that is
jumps out at you.
Jumps
headlines.
out, yeah, right. And that's again okay. So I can pick, right. Oh, that one sounds kind of interesting. I might want to know about that.
I'm definitely a local news person too. I'm one where like the national news comes on at night, and that's when we like switch it to something else. But I always like watching through the 6 o'clock news, which again, as a kid, wasn't whatever. I didn't want it, and now I'm like sitting. I'm like, no, I want to get through the whole thing. Like, I don't want to know the sports anymore. I want to know what's going on. Because now it's kind of cool because I can look up and like, oh, there's so and so on the TV because
exactly because
I know
now
some
you
people.
Know them, right?
Yeah, like someone came on yesterday. I'm like, oh, hey, that's awesome. They're on that. Like that was a great interview. So, and last question for you: what is your? And again, this is by no means pushing you to retire. I don't want you or Gary ever to retire. But like, what do you hope to accomplish in the future going forward? Like, you guys are goal setters. I know you guys aren't just going to punch the clock and go home. You want to make a difference. So, what's your hope for the future of Plattsburgh? What's your hope for the rest of your career, or what do you want to accomplish?
So, I think for me, having this economy being even more diverse than it is. For many years we were awfully dependent on just a few really big things, and that turned out not to work out quite so well. And so industry is changing all the time. And I think we need to be prepared to change with that. We need to be in a position for whatever the next big thing is coming down. And it's just like in education. Well, you can't say, I'm going to teach people exactly for this because that is the thing, because you don't know that that's the thing that's actually going to happen. But to have things in place so that we can take advantage of opportunities for whatever it is that this community can be, as we need to change. If we're not changing, we're going to fall behind. And so I want to be able to make sure that we as a community are able to change and able to grow. I'd also like to see us, one of the projects we were working on, we did that New York Montreal website, for FDI, and we're really, really excited about that coming out. But that's only a part of an overall project that we're doing that we want to be able to help. We need people to come here. We need people to come here to live, right? All of this is so many pieces. We need housing for them to live in if they come here, right? So we need workforce development to make sure that the people have the skills for those next jobs that we don't even know what they are yet. But how do we have the infrastructure in place so that when that time comes, we can help the people learn whatever it is that new skill is that they need to know in order to be successful. Being more diverse in so many more ways, and helping people who are here feel comfortable, who maybe are not the way that we all look, right? Right now.
And actually, so I lied. So one more question off of what you just said. Does lack of homes in the area, has that ever hurt you guys? Or have you not run into that problem yet?
It is something that is sometimes an issue for us when a person comes into town and they are expecting a certain kind of housing.
Is this for individual people, or is this for like a good amount of people that be moving in, or the type of workers that or employees they would attract?
You need a variety of types of housing, right? You need apartments. You need one thing that we do not have here is housing that is furnished. Mm-hmm. Right? So a person comes into town and they need a little time to decide where they want to be. Do I want to be in the city? Do I want to be in Beekmantown? Do I want to be in Peru? Do I don't know, Saranac? Where and so they'd like to rent for a time, and they'd like not to move everything in and then just move everything back out. So that is
the number one thing I get when people come in that are relocating, because they're used to bigger cities and they're used to like, hey, coming in, like you guys must have furnished places. I can just drop my stuff for 6 months to a year. the reason I asked that is because we're in a severe housing shortage. Which, and
so is the rest of the nation. But
it's not. We're not
we're not unique in that one.
No, not by any means. But I look at that that's one of my concerns going forward with like development and stuff. And I was just curious if you guys have seen that pop up yet, because again, the rentals, and I know there's a few things in it. And the good thing is people are aware of it. I mean, it's not like you guys are oblivious to this in the town and the city, and people know that the lack of housing is a problem. But it's like, we don't have a big rental market. We don't have a lot of the entry level homes that I take like Champlain Park. Champlain Park came out in the 50s and 60s from the Air Force Base, and like a lot of these places, and those are very high turnover every year. I mean, there's a lot of homes there, but like every year there's probably a couple dozen homes that sell, and they're bought up pretty fast because they're affordable. They're out of the city,
entry level,
entry level,
first
and the
house
taxes are lower, and
gonna get married and have one child, and
we don't have those, but then we have the middle level. We don't have those, and it's like, and you kind of look at the ones that are going off. Like I was looking at some numbers, year to date from a year ago, which again was a really like humming market. We had a couple months from with the quarantine and the COVID stuff that was like limited, and then June 1st it just opened back up, and it was like we never really were affected by it. And looking at the numbers, like the amount of sales the sales are up, the pendings are up, the listings are down. Like that doesn't bode well for, kind of this way. Yeah. So, I guess whatever way we're hand gestures here. Again, you guys can't see this, or you haven't seen the mic, you haven't seen anything.
And here's
two people that talk with their hands.
Here's Galen and I waving our hands around.
Swatting flies. But, so that was always one, I guess, I'm glad it's not been a huge negative, but that's always something I'm concerned about going forward, is that people may come here, but it's like, well, you don't have, the infrastructure, or, you don't have the housing, or you don't have the amenities or whatever. And I know, again, our leaders are working on it and they're not oblivious to it, which is good.
The thing that when I talked about, an economic development, your work is never done, because it's never going to be perfect. It's always wait. Well, it's better now with the mid-level housing. However, now we really need to work on this other thing, because we just don't have enough people working in such. So it's never going to be perfect. We're always going to be working to improve, and we should be working to improve, right? And we have to be thinking, what is the next thing? What is it going to be in 5 years or 10 years? And even if you don't know exactly what it's going to be, how can we be prepared? Yeah,
that's great. Well, Sue, thank you for coming on. This was great.
It was fun.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad.
Right? It was fun.
You were okay.
Yeah.
Like, you were like, a lot of people come on and they ask me questions like, well, how's it go? What am I supposed to say? You didn't ask me anything. I don't think you gave me a topic. You're like, listen, can you give me some talking points? I'm like, no. Like I don't give to anybody talking points. Because one, I don't even really know. I kind of have like an idea, but we just flow. I actually sketched all these down earlier today because I'm like, listen, there's questions I want to make sure I don't forget. It's usually not like stuff I want to ask. It's more of like, don't forget to ask this question. And you just rolled in. That's why I asked you, like, how are you in meetings? You just kind of like, let's just go. Let's just roll the tape. Let's do this. So, but Sue, I appreciate you coming on. If anybody needs to find you, they can reach out to the North Country Chamber of Commerce. The greatest chamber of commerce in all of the country, right? We can say that.
Thank you.
We'll say that. I think you guys are.
We'll let you say that.
Well, I think you guys are a leader in a lot of it. I think a lot of. I think we have a very strong chamber, and I think a lot of like the very community centric, which is good. And the Irish Person of the Breakfast of the Year award coming up, sponsored by us with a few others, Dana Mora, then the other company which I don't know. Yeah, no, I was pumped. I was like,
that's always fun.
Yeah, and when they asked me, I'm like, okay, you asked the guy that has Irish everywhere for the Irish one. I'm like, yeah, I can't say no to that. And I was actually pumped because I've been wanting that sponsorship, so that's great. So worked out perfect. But if you need to reach Sue, North Country Chamber of Commerce, nymtl.com. Check it out.
Yeah.
New website.
Yep.
New York, Montreal. I think that's it. Anything else?
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about the chamber and what we do.
Just shoot the breeze, right? So
yeah, there you go.
All right, that's it. Episode 118 of the Galen Trombley Show. Thanks for listening to the Galen Trombley Show. If you want to reach me, you can go on Facebook at Galen Trombley, on Instagram at Galen Trombley, and on YouTube at Galen Trombley. The spelling, Gaelen LANTROMBLEY.